Hi there, Jeff Coughlin, Editor Scale Modelling Now. So welcome to this short series of videos where we're going to be looking at these Humbrol weathering powders. As you can see here, I've got the Airfix Bf109E all nicely finished, and this has been finished completely using the weathering powders, or of course the weathering element of the modelling, that is. Primarily what I've done is I've used 4 of the range that I've currently got access to. So here we've got smoke, dark earth, black and white. And you've got multiple applications for these powders. Primarily, I found they work best of all when applied to a flat finish. So you can use them to apply any weathering effects pretty much, from exhaust staining through to rusting, through to general dirt, grime and other effects that you want to add to the paintwork, all with the kind of aim really of getting the model to look more realistic and more pleasing really to the eye. That's the key thing. So if I just bring you in the 109, you can just see briefly what I've done with it. So the big thing I think for me is looking to see how we might be able to create that exhaust staining down the side of the aircraft. I think with all subjects it's important to have a look at reference material, and for me I looked at multiple pictures of 109s and it seemed that they range pretty widely, as you would imagine, from very little weathering at all, even in the Battle of Britain, 2 aircraft that were heavily weathered, and that's what we've got represented here. We've got Von Werer's aircraft, the one that actually crash landed here in the UK, and that's what I've tried to replicate, and it's one of the box top subjects of the Airfix kit release. And so I think trying to get this really sort of realistic looking sort of staining effect is perfect for these weathering powders. It's really easy to do using a series of little stippling brushes, and I'll show you those in the forthcoming videos, right the way through to some more subtle effects which you might struggle to see on the video, but in the cockpit. So things like the seat, excuse me, the cockpit floor particularly, where there's a chance to add a bit of dust and so on in there. So you can get some really nice weathering effects. Cockpit sidewalls, particularly around the ribbing, is another example. The other thing you can do is add some weathering exhaust stain to the underside. Now this aircraft is quite heavily weathered. I wanted it to represent that quite heavy exhaust staining that you often got on 109s. And as I said, do check your references. You'll find this was not uncommon. They used to deposit all kinds of mank along the centre line and the under centre section of the wings. So all of this is done very easily. Rather than use an airbrush, you could use the weathering powders. So for me, I really like that effect. So there we go. That's an intro. This is what we're going to create over the forthcoming series of short videos. So I've had the pleasure and the chance really to kind of record this video at the end, really, rather than at the start. So there's only a short sequence of videos just showing some of the applications that I've talked about. So just a quick recap, we're going to be looking at the cockpit, looking at how you might use some of the powders in there, definitely the exhaust staining, and then the heavy staining on the underside. All of that you'll be able to find out by watching the following short sequence of videos. So I hope you'll come along for the journey and enjoy the ride. Okay, so one use you can put the Humbrol weathering powders to is to do a little bit of shading and shadowing in the cockpit. And so here I'm using the black powder, and just to give you a tiny bit of insight, just had a little bit of a play on the left-hand wall here. So basically we've got the base colour sprayed, the dry brushing is done with a lighter kind of bluey green colour over the ribs. All I've done here is just add a little bit of powder to the around the framing, and then it just provides a little bit of shading, really, a little bit of ghosting. So you get this contrast when you peer inside the cockpit. You've got kind of contrast of the interior RLMO2. That's the kind of idea there. And so I just use a tiny little brush with a pointy end, all done dry. There's no wet applied here. And then literally you can just kind of work it in around. I'm trying to stay off the ribs themselves. You just apply a little bit of this. Yeah, we're talking minute amounts, absolutely minute amounts. You can hardly see it on the brush. You could obviously apply a wash. You could do that if you wanted to do similar kind of effects, but I just think these are really flexible to have a bit of a play like this. Then just use your finger or thumb just to remove any excess if you want. The other nice thing you get is this slightly satin look, which I like. I've always liked that to Luftwaffe paintwork. It just seems to, especially on the outside of the aircraft, it works really well. That's that kind of waxy look, doesn't it? So it's all just about providing bits of contrast for me. Pop some of this inside that little storage pouch there. You know, and it's really not a lot more than that, but that's just a bit of a basic improvement over the kit. So the base colour, which is fine, but you want to bring it to life, add a bit of 3D effects. So we've still got to do some detail painting in here and add one or two extra little bits of detailing that come with the kit. But if you get all this kind of stuff out of the way now, that's quite useful because it provides, you know, a base, and you're kind of building up the layers as you go, and we can just pop on the detail parts in a bit. The only thing I didn't do, which I probably should have done, is take care of that particular sink, well, not sink mark, it's an ejector pin mark. We did do the one here at the back, and in fact, because that's ended up quite light, you can just add a bit of this. Just work that in and just blend that away and make that blend in a little bit more. And if we just get a little Q-tippy type cotton bud thing, which I've got here, we can just blend that in a little bit more. And again, it just makes that all part of the internals now. That's better, that's enough. Bit of shadow there, and we can get on and install the cockpit next, I think. In fact, one thing you could do, you could have a little bit of a play actually. You could add a little bit of sort of browny, dusty type stuff to the inside of the tub. In fact, if we just quickly have a little look at that now, that might be useful. So we could perhaps use the dark earth powder for that. I mean, we're talking minimal here. This is just to add, again, a little bit of contrast and colour. Probably even use the same brush because there's hardly any pigment on there. So you can see here, just using the lid, we can just add a little bit of that dust to our brush. And then this is just going to go in and around the floor, just to add a little bit more interest in there. Sort of dried mud, dried dirt and so on. So it's not much, is it? Just bits. You've got the pilot's boots and all sorts, and ground crew and all the rest of it here. Just helps to take away that kind of new look which the base paint just gives, doesn't it? There you go. A little bit in there too. Don't think it needs much more than that. And away we go, really. So that's a couple of little ways you can use the weathering powders in and around the cockpit area. The best thing is just have a play and experiment and see what you like and what you don't, and you can do more or less of it accordingly. Okay, well here's a quick look at the cockpit so far. You can see we've got the decal instrument panel, which I think works really well. I just applied some Future, some Johnson's Clear, and then put the decal over that, and then just applied a little bit of heat with the hairdryer, and that drew the decal down over the raised detail, which is good. And the rest is as you've seen already. The little straps for the pilot's boots on the rudder pedals are in there. Just made those with a little bit of metal foil. Again, I've left them a bit brighter because when it's all closed up, it will just make them visible, which is what you want. And you can see some of that, some of the Humbrol weathering powders on the floor, and I think again that adds just a little bit to the look of the whole thing. We've got the belts to go on, and I'll add those later on. I might actually just do them before we close the fuselage. It might make it just a bit easier to get access to the side belts. So in fact, I will do them next. And for that, we'll be using these Eduard pre-painted belts you can see here, which are going to be great. Nice, quick and easy, and we'll add those. And then we can close up the fuselage. But at least that's the progress so far. Okay, be back soon.